Let's talk about risk. We know that pen testing can pose a risk for the client and the tester that things may go wrong during a test, but you want to make sure that using clear communication, your client is informed and that issues are anticipated during a pre-engagement phase. That way your client can make informed decisions if something does go wrong. Again, you would want to inform them that pen testing is different than vulnerability scanning, and you would want to identify risks associated with potential system failures and exposure of sensitive data. That is done in coordination with your client. That way you can help your client keep their risk within acceptable business parameters. And again, clear communication and written documentation is the key here. Liabilities. Sometimes testing can create an issue on a client system. You want to make sure you outline the expectations and offer your client the option to test a non-production system. You would want to explain risks to your client. On this slide, I included a handful of issues that could occur. Again, if protected or regulated data is inadvertently accessed, you would want to make sure you know how to handle the data securely, understand the industry standards that are defined for the pen test for those areas, which could include PCI DSS or ISO 2701. You want to make sure that your testing does not compromise data protection requirements and that testers are professional and work within a reputable code of conduct, and they should have a requisite level of experience to perform testing to a required standard. You want to try to avoid deleting or destroying client data, creating a loss of availability through denial of service, accessing out-of-scope data or services, or creating other events that has a large client impact. And in the event that a liability should be incurred, you would want to ensure you have an attorney on hand to answer any questions. Limitations are important to cover with your client. You want to let your client know that testing is only covering a selected environment, not the entire business, that it does not cover all of the ways that information can be exposed, that it's playing a small role in reviewing a human element. It's a snapshot or one view of the systems that you're testing at one point in time. So as systems change, exposure to the business may change as well. That limitations introduced by the client can definitely impact and restrict the depth of your testing, and that the results can be technical and challenging for business owners to understand within the broader context of their company. That means that you need to interpret your results so that they can understand the business impact. We have responsibilities to our client. We want to keep our client informed. We want to ensure that our reporting and the data that we obtain from our testing is safe, that we discuss with the client whether we need to use encryption and how to destroy the data that we collect. We would want to follow a code of ethics and possibly have a NDA so that we do not disclose client data and we protect confidentiality. You would want to make sure that you inform the client of any issues that ever arise from your testing and that you have a very clear and defined format of communication. That may include a call if it's an urgent issue or an email to the client team, but this should all be defined and outlined prior to beginning your testing within the scoping documents. Want to talk about what is allowed for testing. This means defining your testing techniques and making sure that your client is aware of any possible intrusive techniques that could cause damage or create embarrassment for your client. Those could include phishing, social engineering, brute force attacks, denial of service, or data harvesting sensitive information or material. Again, we are focusing on web application testing, but there's overlap between this and what other forms of pen testing look like. So I wanted to make sure that we define to help our client what we'll be doing and what is definitely on the table for the pen test and what is off the table for the pen test so that everyone is clear about the scope for the test. Sensitive information. This is a very important topic. It's critical that when you find sensitive data within a test, you understand how to handle it. You would want to bring this topic up to the client in the scoping meeting so that both parties understand the procedure for managing this type of data. You may encounter personal information or other sensitive details that fall under privacy laws and regulations. And if you discover the data during the test, you would want to make the client aware and make an informed decision. I would recommend that this information is put in writing so that you and the client are clear about how this would be handled during the test. Emergencies. We hope we never run into them, but we would like to have a plan in place just in case. So this would be documented. You would want to have a timetable based upon criticality and contact people and solutions. If the plan is put into action when an issue arises, such as when you're testing, you drop a database table, or you end up taking down a server due to heavy scanning, that you know what to do and how to help your client. This is a protection for you and for your client both. So it's important to have a plan and have it documented so that everyone understands what to do in case there is an emergency during testing. I put together a table for you of tester constraints, and what it is an understanding between you and the client of what happens during testing. Many of these may appear to be obvious, but if this is the first time your client is having a penetration test, they may need to understand what the limitations are. So the example of, for a tester, you have a restricted scope. You might not attack other parts of a business, but an attacker has no limitations. They will find a weak point and they will exploit it regardless of who owns it. If they can't get in one way, they will get in another way. And so you might want to describe this to a new client and have them consider simulating a live test as closely as possible, testing outside of normal business hours, or testing non-production systems. Again, we want to test within the confines of the law when we're doing a pen test, but attackers may break the law to achieve their objectives. We have time limits, but attackers do not. An attacker can have unlimited time to attack. We are looking at a snapshot in time, and changes can introduce new vulnerabilities, but attackers can penetrate the environment at any time.